thought I would try to talk just a little bit. I had a friend ask me last night actually about the Book of Revelation and where the United States is in it. And at first I laughed because I thought it was a joke, but then I realized. But then said she was serious, and I don't think it's a silly question. It's just hard for me to explain. I don't think it's hard to understand. Like, I think people are very smart and they can pick up on this stuff very well and very intuitively. I think it's just hard for me to explain because it's hard. I don't think I struggle using the right language, or maybe I'll use a word and people will have a different association with that word. So I think the best language in the entire world is humility. So if you hear me talking, like, try to hear it in a humble way and be like, okay, well, maybe he's meaning this if he's using this word, because I don't know. So anyway, that being said, in the Book of Revelation, he seems to. I don't know that he mentions any nation specifically. So, like, because of the way just everybody in the West, probably maybe in the East too, just everybody seems to be brought up the past, especially with the rise of science. Science is a form of mathematics where we, I'll get to the Revelation. I feel like I just need to hit on this stuff first. It's a form of mathematics, and mathematics is a way of, like, numbering things and counting things. It's accounting for things. So you're trying to pin things down. It's a way of it's a unit of measurement. So it's being able to grasp things in your hands, to account for them, to hold to them, to number them, to get the specifics of things. So that's kind of our the way we naturally see now with the rise of science. We try to do that with things. We try to say, this tree outside is this tree. Like, if you see an oak tree, you're talking about this oak tree, not the oak tree, like the pattern of oak trees, not like the symbol of the oak tree. You know, we would say, like, oh, this tree. Sorry, I'm just looking outside of my car. I see a tree, so that's why I went with that example. But you're saying, like, then he went and sat beneath the oak tree. So if I said that sentence, normally in our head we would think, oh, well, this guy probably has an oak tree in his backyard or something like that. But if you hear that in the Bible, it's more saying he sat beneath the archetype of the oak tree. You could say the type, the form, the pattern. Those who are Christian would probably know this in Genesis, after its kind. It will say the tree put forth after its kind. So you're sitting before this heavenly idea, beneath this heavenly idea of the oak tree. It's like a heavenly pattern. It's a blueprint, the heavenly blueprint of the oak tree. So that's why Jesus will say something to like he says to the disciple, what was it, Nathaniel? He says, before I called you, I saw you sitting under the fig tree. So it's like he sees him. He might not have been sitting under an actual fig tree. It's the symbol of the fig tree and everything that means. And I can get into that later of what I think that is, but that's neither here nor there right now. So all that being said, when we get into the Book of Revelation, that's how I personally enter into it. And so when I see it mention nations, I don't see them as specific nations. I see them as heavenly blueprints, or a nature or a spirit of a nation. So, like, you could say capitalism, like the nation of the United States is kind of a nation of capitalism. So there's this heavenly idea of capitalism that we have formulated and structured our nation under. So, that being said, the United States is in the Book of Revelation if you're just looking and you're watching. And it's not, when I get into these things, I think a lot of people think I'm a gloom and doom person, but it's not that. It's just like, it's just more like, I just watch out, because it's a prophetic book in a way, and it talks about the past, things have happened. Like, the Book of Revelation is historical. It's happening right now, and it's going to happen in the future, because it's just talking about patterns of reality and things that happen, and it talks about it in a very symbolic and poetic way. So, the United States, there's certain kingdoms that are mentioned that seem to be mentioned throughout, not just Revelation, but throughout the whole Bible, that are brought up a lot. In the Older Testament, I'm not as familiar with them, but there seems to be, like, the Philistines and all these other ones. Those seem to fade away as you get into the book of more of the prophets. And then the prophets, the heavy hitters are like Egypt, the kingdom of Tyre, kingdom of Babylon, and the kingdom of Assyria. And those all have different spirits behind them, like different motivations, different driving forces, you could say. So it was a physical nation at that time because it was historical, but the idea of it, the heavenly blueprint, the pattern, the spirit behind it remains in the heavens, and so anybody can find themselves under that. So so when you're reading the book of the prophets, you could see the United States acting clearly like the kingdom of Babylon, or clearly like the kingdom of Assyria. Like right now, a good example is Russia is acting like Assyria. Assyria, if you read the book, like read the book of the part in Isaiah, it's in Hezekiah, it's in I think Book of Chronicles, and Assyria comes to attack King Hezekiah, attacks Jerusalem, and just look at what he's doing and what he says. The king of Assyria, he says, like, it seems to me that that kingdom is more like a kingdom of force and kingdom of oppression and power. We're going to use our blunt force, and we're going to use terror we're going to try to strike terror in your hearts through force and power and affliction, to take control. And that's how we gain power, and is we oppress. That seems to be Assyria to me. The kingdom of Babylon is the kingdom of like the self-exaltation of man as God. You can do that. That's like the serpent in the garden, because that's intrigue, because you want knowledge. Knowledge is good, and so they'll flatter. Kingdom of Babylon is like flattery. You'll flatter people and say, no, you're fine in your sins, and then you bring people in, and people unite under you, and then you just keep exalting yourself and keep exalting man, to where man becomes the judge of all things and not God. That's Babylon. So you can see how the United States can fall under all those categories at certain times. And that's why it's just be watchful, because it's like, you ask what's going to happen in the United States, and it's like, well, don't keep acting like Babylon, because then pride comes before destruction. And if you keep exalting ourselves as Babylon, then destruction's coming. And that's why it sounds like gloom and doom, but it's more just a warning, like, repent. That's the message. It's always the message. Repent. Turn back to God. Get on your knees. Humble yourselves. Pray to Him. Look at Him. Focus on Him. That's like all it is. So that being said, Russia seems to be acting like Assyria right now. Let's use power. Let's use bombs. Let's use force. Let's use blood. Let's use the sword to exalt ourselves and take power. The kingdom of Tyre is the merchant city. So that can very well be seen as capitalism. Very much so. They have, when it talks about the kingdom of Tyre in Ezekiel, it says it's like the most wise city in finances and in dealing in trade and stuff like that. So it's this heavenly city that you could see, like all these, if you saw these rivers, like look at all the clouds, there's like these big rivers in the sky of like, and you could see it as like the finances of the world, or the merchants, or the goods of this world. And it's like this heavenly city that just kind of can direct them to this land or that land. So Tyre has wisdom and all that. You can see it as capitalism. It's often the city that's described as being in the midst of the sea. So the sea is like the multitudes of peoples, and all the peoples kind of go to it. It's the harlot city. It sings to you. It's like a siren in the sea. It's the city of mermaids, and the goods of this world, the cares of this life, the deceitfulness of riches. They call out to you. They sing sweet things to you. And then they call you to themselves, and then they dash you on the rocks, sort of thing. It's all that imagery packed into the city of Tyre. So you can see how the United States is like that as well. It's no longer a nation under God. For the most part, it should be. And if we could get back to that, then we'd find peace. But we keep uniting ourselves under all these other weird, deceptive, deceitful things. And not to be harsh in that, because they're distracting things, and they're not always bad, because like having the goods of this world, you can be helpful and generous with those things. It's the when your eye starts to lose track, and we easily idolize things, or we easily get attached to them, and then we forget that all things are from God, and we get worried about, hey, I might not eat today or something, and we stop thinking, and we start focusing on that and freaking out, rather than thinking like, I could eat tomorrow, or I'll be fine. God always takes care of us. And even if you hear about these people that live in extreme circumstances of suffering, and they almost later on in life, they come to enjoy it because they had each other, they had a community, they had, there was growth through that, and that suffering brought them closer together and caused them to be more thankful, appreciate the world in a greater way. So, yeah, I don't know where I got all that. But anyways, I guess it's just have comfort, have peace, because having God and having each other, you really don't need anything else. Like, you don't need anything in this world. It's all fleeting anyway. Even people worry about food and water, and it's like, you eat and it's gone, and you got to do it the next day. Like, it's the story's better, the people are better, the narrative's better, the community's better, the love of one another is so much better. You could have that for 2-3 days and go on, be with God forever, and it would be so much better than being alone and having all the goods of this world. That was the other. Egypt is, I maybe just I don't think this is just personally though. It's the kingdom of flesh. It's materialism, seems to be, and it's good. See, that's a good thing, because we use the herbs of this field, we use the world, we eat, we enjoy life, all those things. But it's when you become a slave to those passions, or a slave to the things of the world. That's when, which you kind of are in a sense, because we live in a body, we live in a flesh, right? But when it's being solely focused on that, and we lose sight of God, and then everything's this materialistic world, and then Egypt has bound us, and that's when we're in bondage to all the elements of the world, because we can't see outside of it. That's our viewpoint and our worldview. So that's when Egypt has bound you, is when you lose sight of God, and you need that birth from Egypt, that birth through the Red Sea, where you go into the wilderness and you're being humbled and you're being drawn back to God, and the material things of this world are like breaking off you through they're dying. The unbelief is dying in the wilderness. So yeah, you can see the way the United States is all those. The other thing too, though, the one thing, and here's the prophetic warning. So, this is one thing that you have to let go of it, because if I was always brought up saying Isaiah 14, where it talks about Lucifer, and in Ezekiel where it talks about like the cherub with the musical instruments, like all of that is just totally bogus. Like, if you read the Bible, like, read it. It probably does apply to Lucifer, but it's more talking about the king of Babylon and the king of Tyre, which could, if you're looking at patterns and symbols, that could apply to Satan also. But that could also apply to you, and it could apply to a kingdom. It could apply to all these things, because it's talking about. So if you read those two passages, you will see that they're very. The book of Tyre, the guy, the angel that's described there, he's dressed, the apparel he's wearing is very, very similar to what the priests wear. He's got all the stones in his chest, like the priest would wear all the stones in the ephod. And so you can find yourself in those patterns, is what I'm saying. So it's a warning to not be like that. And the Lucifer that we always describe as Satan, that's Adam. Like, it's the same thing. Go read Genesis 3, and it's the same thing. He says, I'll be like God. I'll be like the Most High and be judge of all. I'll know good and evil. So it's the same thing. So that being said, those you can find yourself there. You could find the United States acting the same way. And then in Revelation, there's the harlot that sits on many waters, and it's the harlot. Like, that's the pattern, is it's a harlot. It's the harlot of harlots, you could say. Like, we know the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Song of Songs. It's the harlot of harlots. It's the divine structure, the heavenly pattern, the heavenly blueprint of what a harlot is, of the nature, how the harlot acts, all those things. So the harlot that sits on many waters, it's talking could be about a specific, just the entire world playing the harlot with the things of the world, and like being in bed with all the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, the pride of life, all those things. That's what we play harlotry with. So we can find ourselves being the harlot. Israel in Ezekiel, or Jerusalem, God calls them a harlot all the time. The church acts like a harlot all the time. The United States could act like a harlot. Like, it's just, once you see the patterns and the symbols, you can look at it, I think, and see, okay, here's the United States. Here's where we are. We're acting like this. We need God. We need to turn back to God. Or we can look at it. So all the nations, every single nation, every single person, every single individual, when you look at it in forms of symbolisms and patterns, you can find yourself in the book of Revelation. So that's, sorry this was so long. Hopefully that makes sense. I really hope it does. I don't think it's hard to understand if you give it the right amount of attention. I think it's just really, I just don't think I do a good job of explaining that. So I'm sorry if that is confusing to people. It's probably bad on my part if it is. Anyway, thanks. Hopefully that was helpful to some